My name is Sophia Chen. I'm 34, and I just won the National Science Foundation's Career Achievement Award, the highest honor in my field. As I stood backstage, moments before being called to accept, my phone lit up with texts from my parents. "We're in the lobby. Where are our seats?" My hands trembled as I read their messages, not from nervousness about my speech, but from the decision I'd made weeks earlier. They weren't on the guest list. After 20 years of having every achievement dismissed or minimized, I had chosen not to invite them to the ceremony that validated my life's work. The security guard approached me. "Dr. Chen, there's a couple insisting they're your parents. They're demanding to be let in. What would you like me to do?" I took a deep breath and gave the answer I'd rehearsed. "They're not on the list. I'm sorry, but they cannot enter. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from." If you've ever had your achievements dismissed by family, only to have them try to claim credit when you succeeded, hit subscribe and stay with me. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people who should have supported you from the beginning. I grew up in a middle-class suburb of Chicago, the daughter of Chinese immigrants who had very specific expectations for success. My father, Wei Chen, was an electrical engineer who worked at the same company for 30 years. My mother, Lynn, taught piano lessons from our living room. From an early age, I was taught that academic excellence wasn't extraordinary. It was the minimum expectation. When I brought home my first 4.0 GPA in 6th grade, my father glanced at it and asked, "What about extracurricular activities? Colleges want well-rounded students." When I won the regional science fair in 8th grade, my mother nodded and said, "Good, but Jessica Kim won the state competition last year." Jessica Kim was the daughter of my mother's friend, someone I was constantly measured against. My younger brother Kevin experienced a different reality. 3 years my junior, he struggled with academics but excelled at soccer. His B's were celebrated, his goals in soccer games warranted family dinners out, and his participation trophies were displayed prominently in our living room. Meanwhile, my academic medals were stored in a drawer in my bedroom. I don't blame Kevin. He was as much a victim of our parents' uneven expectations as I was. We've talked about it as adults, and he admits feeling pressure to excel in sports precisely because academics were my territory. Our parents had inadvertently pitted us against each other by compartmentalizing our worth. High school intensified the pattern. I joined the robotics team and discovered a passion for engineering and computer science. We made it to nationals my junior year, and I was named team captain, an honor that my parents acknowledged with a distracted "that's nice" while preparing for Kevin's soccer tournament. The most revealing moment came during college applications. I was accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, my dream school and a significant achievement. That same week, Kevin was selected for a regional all-star soccer team. My parents threw him a party with extended family and friends. My MIT acceptance was mentioned as a brief aside during the celebration. "You know how Sophia is, always studying. She got into MIT," my mother told her friends, before quickly returning to praising Kevin's athletic prowess. I stood in the corner, holding my acceptance letter, feeling simultaneously proud and invisible. At MIT, I found my tribe, other students passionate about robotics and artificial intelligence. For the first time, my achievements were recognized and celebrated by peers and professors who understood their significance. I thrived in this environment, graduating with honors and continuing to a PhD program at Stanford. Throughout graduate school, my relationship with my parents grew increasingly distant. Our phone calls became perfunctory. They would ask about my studies in vague terms, then spend twice as long updating me on Kevin's life and accomplishments. He had transferred colleges to play Division I soccer and later signed with a minor league team. Achievements that warranted multiple proud posts on my mother's social media, while my published research papers went unmentioned. I don't want to paint my parents as villains. They worked incredibly hard to give us opportunities they never had. They paid for my undergraduate education, helped with my first apartment security deposit, and never actively discouraged my pursuits. Their failure wasn't malicious. It was their inability to understand or value what I was accomplishing in a field foreign to their experience. By the time I completed my PhD, I had accepted that my professional achievements would never receive the acknowledgement from my parents that I craved. I stopped sharing publication news, grant approvals, or research breakthroughs. Our conversations centered on family gossip, the weather, and occasionally, Kevin's coaching career after a knee injury ended his playing days. After completing my postdoctoral fellowship, I accepted a position as an assistant professor of computer science at Northwestern University. My research focused on developing AI systems that could predict structural failures in aging infrastructure, technology with the potential to prevent bridge collapses and building failures. 3 years into my tenure-track position, my team made a breakthrough. Our algorithm successfully identified structural weaknesses in a test bridge that other inspection methods had missed. The results attracted attention from both academic circles and the Department of Transportation. That year, I published 5 papers in top journals, secured a major grant, and was invited to speak at 3 international conferences. I was building a reputation in my field and enjoying the respect of colleagues who understood the significance of my work. During a holiday visit home, I brought copies of my latest publications. They remained unopened on the coffee table while my parents enthusiastically showed me Kevin's new house, purchased with help from their substantial down payment contribution. When I mentioned my upcoming keynote speech in Tokyo, my mother interrupted to show me pictures of my cousin's new baby. "When are you going to think about settling down, Sophia?" she asked. "Your research is fine, but there's more to life than computers and robots." "My research is more than fine, Mom," I replied, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "I'm developing technology that could save lives." My father patted my hand in a way that felt dismissive. "Of course, it's important to you, and that's good. We just want you to be happy." The implication was clear. In their minds, my career success couldn't possibly lead to happiness, not like a husband or children would. I left that visit with a familiar, hollow feeling. At 32, I had learned to seek validation elsewhere, but the child in me still longed for parental approval that never seemed to come. The following year, something unexpected happened. I was featured in a major National Geographic article about innovators changing the world. The 6-page spread included a professional photograph of me in my lab, surrounded by my team and our equipment. The morning after the issue was released, my phone exploded with notifications. Friends, colleagues, and even long-lost high school classmates were tagging me in social media posts about the article. Among the notifications was a surprising one. My mother had shared the article on her own social media. So proud of our daughter, the scientist, always knew she would do great things. I stared at her post in disbelief. The comments section was filled with congratulations from relatives and family friends. and my mother was responding as if she'd been my cheerleader all along. She had never once described herself as proud of my academic or professional achievements directly to me. When she called later that day, her voice was brimming with an enthusiasm I'd never heard regarding my work. "Everyone is so impressed, Sophia. My friends keep calling to talk about you. Mrs. Park, you remember Jessica Kim's mother? She especially wanted to know more about your research. I told her you've been doing important work for years." I felt a complex mixture of emotions, validation that finally my work was being acknowledged, but also resentment that it took external recognition for my parents to show interest. They were proud not of my accomplishment itself, but of how others perceived it, and by extension, how it reflected on them. My father got on the phone next. "This is quite impressive, Sophia. I didn't realize your work was so important. Why didn't you tell us you were being featured in National Geographic?" The question stunned me into momentary silence. I had told them in an email they hadn't responded to, and then again during our last phone call, when the conversation quickly shifted to Kevin's new coaching position. "I did tell you," I said quietly, "several times." "Well," he said, brushing past my comment, "we're telling everyone about our famous daughter now." In the months following the National Geographic feature, I noticed a shift in my parents' behavior. Suddenly, they were interested in my research, asking questions they had never bothered with before. My mother requested additional copies of the magazine to distribute to relatives. My father mentioned my work to his colleagues. Their newfound interest felt hollow, not a genuine appreciation for my work, but pride in the external validation it had received. They hadn't changed. The only difference was that now my achievements came with public recognition they could share in. That spring, I was nominated for the National Science Foundation's Career Achievement Award. The nomination itself was an honor. The award typically went to researchers with decades more experience. When I was selected as a finalist, I mentioned it during a phone call with my parents. "That sounds nice, dear," my mother said, before asking if I'd seen the photos of Kevin's team winning a local championship. I bit back my frustration. The NSF award was the equivalent of an Oscar in my field. Not nice, but potentially career-defining. 2 weeks later, I received the call. I had won. The ceremony would be held in Washington, D.C., with leaders from academia, industry, and government in attendance. Each recipient could invite a limited number of guests to the prestigious event. As I considered my guest list, I felt the familiar twist of conflict. Part of me, the child still seeking approval, wanted to invite my parents, hoping this achievement would finally be significant enough to earn their genuine respect. Another part, the adult who had built a life and career without their validation, questioned why I should include them in a moment they hadn't helped me reach. I discussed it with my therapist, Dr. Marshall, with whom I'd been working on family issues for several years. "What would it mean to you to have them there?" she asked. "I'm not sure anymore," I admitted. 10 years ago, I would have said everything. Now, I'm worried their presence would take something away from the moment, rather than add to it. Because they'd be celebrating a different achievement than the one I actually made. They'd be celebrating having a daughter who won an award other people think is important, not the years of work that earned it. I decided to sit with the decision for a week before finalizing my guest list. During that time, something happened that crystallized my thinking. My university press office published an article about my award. It was shared on social media, where my mother found it before I had a chance to tell her myself. She immediately posted it with the caption, My brilliant daughter follows in her father's footsteps with this prestigious engineering award. The inaccuracies were glaring. My father wasn't an engineer in the sense that I was. He had a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and had worked as a technician. I wasn't following in his footsteps. My research area had nothing to do with his work. And he had certainly never won a national award. More troubling was the implication that my achievement was somehow derivative of or connected to my father's career. It erased my individual journey and the obstacles I'd overcome, many of which included their lack of support. When I called to correct her, she seemed confused by my reaction. "I'm just proud of you, Sophia. Why are you being so sensitive?" "Because it's not accurate, Mom. Dad and I work in completely different fields, and this post makes it seem like my award is connected to him somehow." "Well, you must have gotten your interest in science from somewhere," she said defensively. "We're just happy to see you succeeding." The conversation deteriorated from there. My attempt to assert the independence of my achievement was interpreted as ungratefulness. My father got on the phone to tell me I was overreacting and should appreciate that they were finally taking an interest in my work. That word, finally, was particularly painful. It acknowledged their years of indifference while suggesting I should be grateful for their belated attention. After the call, I made my decision. I submitted my guest list for the ceremony, my closest research colleagues, my mentor from Stanford, and 2 friends who had supported my work from the beginning. My parents were not included. 3 days before the ceremony, I received a call from my mother. "We've booked our flights to Washington for your award thing," she announced cheerfully. "Dad managed to get Friday off work, so we'll arrive Thursday evening. Which hotel are you staying at?" I felt a surge of anxiety. "Mom, I didn't send you an invitation." There was a pause. "What do you mean? We're your parents?" "The ceremony has limited seating. I already submitted my guest list." I tried to keep my voice even, though my heart was racing. "Well, call them and add us," she said, as if it were that simple. "Tell them your parents need to be there." "Mom, it doesn't work that way. The venue has security, and only people on the approved list can attend." Her voice hardened. "Sophia, this is ridiculous. Of course we're coming to see you get your award. What would people think if we weren't there?" That last question revealed everything. Her concern wasn't about missing my achievement, but about how their absence would be perceived by others. "I'm sorry you booked flights without checking with me first," I said, "but my guest list is finalized." "Is this because of that silly argument about the Facebook post? I deleted it, you know." "This isn't about any single incident," I tried to explain. "For 20 years, my achievements have been an afterthought to you and Dad. Now that there's public recognition, suddenly you're interested. It doesn't feel genuine." "How can you say that?" Her voice cracked with what sounded like genuine hurt. "We've always supported you. You've supported me financially, and I'm grateful for that. But you've never valued my work or showed real interest in my career until other people decided it was impressive." My father got on the phone, his voice tight with anger. "Sophia, you're being childish. We're your parents. We're coming to this ceremony." "No, Dad, you're not." My voice was surprisingly steady. "This is my achievement, and I get to decide who shares it with me." The conversation devolved into a heated argument. My mother cried. My father made threats about reconsidering their support, though I had been financially independent for years. And I held my ground with a conviction that surprised even me. After hanging up, I called the ceremony coordinator and alerted security that my parents might attempt to enter without authorization. It felt extreme, but I knew my parents well enough to anticipate they might try to force the issue. The next 2 days brought a barrage of calls and messages, not just from my parents, but from relatives they had enlisted to pressure me. Aunts, uncles, and cousins reached out to tell me how heartbroken my parents were and how disrespectful I was being. Kevin called too, his tone more understanding, but still urging me to reconsider. "They're really upset, Soph," he said. "I know they haven't always been great about your work, but they're proud of you now." "That's the problem," I replied. "They're only proud now that someone else has deemed my work important. They're proud of the external validation, not me or what I've actually accomplished." The night before the ceremony, I turned off my phone and tried to focus on what should have been one of the happiest moments of my professional life. I rehearsed my acceptance speech, laid out my outfit, and attempted to quiet the guilt and doubt churning inside me. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should have taken this opportunity to rebuild our relationship rather than assert this boundary. Another part felt certain that allowing them to participate now, after years of dismissal, would be a disservice to myself and the authentic acknowledgement of my journey. The morning of the ceremony arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. I dressed in a tailored navy suit, applied minimal makeup, and headed to the venue for sound check and final preparations. The ceremony would take place in a grand hall at the Smithsonian, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the National Mall. 2 hours before the event was set to begin, I received a message from the ceremony coordinator. "Dr. Chen, there's a couple in the lobby claiming to be your parents. They don't have tickets or identification on our guest list. Security is asking for confirmation of how to proceed." Even though I had anticipated this, seeing the message still sent a wave of anxiety through me. I replied confirming they weren't invited and should not be admitted. The coordinator responded that security would handle it respectfully but firmly. 20 minutes later, my phone rang, my father calling from the lobby. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Sophia, this is absurd. We've flown across the country for this. The security people are treating us like criminals." I took a deep breath. "Dad, I told you clearly that I didn't invite you. You chose to come anyway, assuming you could override my decision. We're your parents. We have a right to be here." "No, Dad, you don't. This is my professional achievement, and I get to decide who shares it with me." I could hear my mother in the background, her voice tearful, as she said something I couldn't make out. "Your mother is crying," my father said accusingly. "Is that what you want?" "What I wanted," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice, "was parents who celebrated my achievements all along, not just when they came with public recognition. What I wanted was to have my accomplishments valued the way you valued Kevin's. What I want now is to enjoy this moment with people who have genuinely supported my work." "So you're punishing us for not understanding your science things?" he asked incredulously. "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself and the significance of this moment." I paused, then added more gently, "Maybe we can talk about this when I'm back home next week, but today is about my work, not our relationship issues." "If you don't let us in," he said, his voice hardening, "there will be consequences for this family." It was the kind of vague threat that would have terrified me years ago. Now it only reinforced that I had made the right decision. "I understand you're upset," I replied, "but my decision stands. I have to go prepare now." I ended the call, hands trembling slightly. A text came through from Kevin. "They just called me, pretty upset. You okay?" I appreciated that his first concern was for me, not them. "I'm okay. We'll call you after the ceremony." The security team escorted my parents from the building. The ceremony coordinator assured me they had left the premises, though they had made quite a scene in the process. As difficult as that confrontation had been, when it was over, I felt an unexpected sense of lightness. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my parents and maintained it despite their pressure. The guilt was still there, but alongside it was something new, a feeling of self-respect and authenticity. The ceremony itself was everything I could have hoped for. Seated around me were colleagues who understood the significance of my work, mentors who had guided me, and friends who had supported me through countless research setbacks and breakthroughs. When my name was called, their applause felt genuine, celebration not of reflected glory, but of the work itself. At the podium, looking out at faces who valued me for exactly who I was and what I had accomplished, I felt a profound sense of belonging. My prepared speech acknowledged the collaborative nature of scientific research and thanked specific colleagues for their contributions. In an unplanned deviation, I also thanked those who challenged me to find my own validation, ultimately making this achievement more meaningful. At the reception following the ceremony, I was approached by a senior researcher whose work I had long admired. She congratulated me, then added, "I saw what happened in the lobby earlier." Setting boundaries with family is its own kind of courage. I was surprised she knew about the incident. "It wasn't an easy decision," I admitted. She nodded. "I faced something similar early in my career. My parents wanted to showcase my achievements without understanding them. It took years to find a healthy balance." She smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right call today." This moment deserved to be authentic. On my flight home the following day, I drafted a long email to my parents. I explained more calmly than I had been able to in person how their sudden interest in my career had felt performative rather than genuine. I acknowledged their hurt feelings while standing by my decision. I expressed hope that we could work toward a more authentic relationship, one based on who I actually was, rather than who they wished me to be. "I didn't exclude you to punish you," I wrote. "I excluded you because including you would have meant accepting the narrative that you've always been supportive of my career, when that simply hasn't been true. I'm not angry anymore, but I am committed to honesty in our relationship going forward." 3 days passed before my mother replied. Her email was shorter than mine, but contained something I hadn't expected. An acknowledgement. "We didn't understand your work," she wrote. "It seemed so abstract, so different from anything we knew. It was easier to focus on Kevin's achievements because we understood what winning a game meant. We didn't know how to celebrate things we didn't comprehend. That's not an excuse, but perhaps an explanation. We should have tried harder." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the most honest assessment of our dynamic she had ever offered. My father added a brief postscript. "We're still hurt by your decision, but we're trying to understand it. Maybe we could visit your lab sometime to learn more about what you actually do." That tentative olive branch led to a gradual restructuring of our relationship over the following months. They did eventually visit my lab, asking questions that revealed genuine effort to understand, if not the technical details of my work, at least its importance and applications. When my next paper was published, I sent them a simplified summary I had written specifically for them. My mother called to ask follow-up questions that, while basic, showed she had actually read it. Our relationship remains a work in progress. Old patterns sometimes resurface, and I've accepted that they may never fully understand or appreciate my work in the way my colleagues do. But there's a new authenticity to our interactions. They no longer pretend to have been supportive all along, and I no longer pretend that their dismissal didn't hurt. It's been 2 years since the award ceremony incident. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something I never expected. A cautious but honest connection based on who we actually are, not who we wish each other to be. Last month, I was invited to give a TED Talk about my research. When the invitation came, I considered whether to tell my parents about it. In the past, I might have kept it to myself to avoid another disappointment or post-award ceremony, might have mentioned it with lingering resentment. Instead, I called them directly. "I've been invited to give a TED Talk," I said. "It's a significant platform for sharing my research with a broader audience." There was a brief pause before my mother asked, "Is that like a TV show?" I smiled at the familiar disconnect, but instead of feeling frustrated, I took the opportunity to explain. It's more like a prestigious conference presentation that gets recorded and shared online. Millions of people might watch it. "That sounds important," my father said. "When is it happening?" "In 3 months, and I'd like to invite you if you're interested in coming." Their surprise was audible. After what had happened at the awards ceremony, they hadn't expected to be included in my professional events. "We'd like that," my mother said cautiously, "but only if you really want us there." "I do," I replied, and realized I meant it. "But I need you to understand something. I'm inviting you to share in my achievement, not to validate it. I don't need you to fully understand the technical aspects of my work. I just need you to respect that it's important, even if it's different from the path you would have chosen for me." The conversation that followed was one of the most honest we'd ever had. My mother acknowledged that they had projected their own definitions of success onto both me and Kevin, often to our detriment. My father admitted that his pride in my recent accomplishments had initially been influenced by external validation rather than genuine understanding. "We're learning," he said. "Slower than we should have, but we're trying." Last week, they attended my TED Talk. They sat in the audience wearing expressions I had rarely seen directed at my academic achievements, genuine pride mixed with a touch of awe. Afterward, at dinner, my mother asked questions that showed she had been listening attentively, trying to connect my research to real-world applications she could understand. "The part about bridges, that means you could prevent collapses, save lives?" she asked. "That's exactly right," I confirmed. "That's the practical application of all those algorithms and data models I've been working on for years." "I wish we had understood that sooner," my father said quietly. "It's not just numbers and computers, it's protecting people." That moment, their genuine attempt to see the meaning in my work, not just its external accolades, felt more validating than any award ceremony could have. The choice to exclude my parents from that award ceremony 2 years ago wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about honoring my own journey and the authentic recognition of my work. It was a boundary that ultimately created space for a more honest relationship, one based on who we really are, not who we pretend to be for each other's comfort. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family around your achievements or life choices? Have you struggled with parents or relatives who only valued your success when others recognized it? Share your experiences in the comments below. I've learned that healthy relationships require honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our families and ourselves is the courage to break patterns that no longer serve us. The validation we seek from parents is powerful, but it cannot define our worth. The most meaningful recognition comes from those who understand and value our authentic selves, whether that eventually includes family or not. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on family dynamics, personal boundaries, and finding validation within. Sometimes the hardest achievements aren't the professional ones, but learning to honor our truth in relationships that have shaped us.